Hi, everybody. I'm Alicia. I'm a psych nurse practitioner and I own my own private practice. And I teach other psych NPs how to find freedom and balance in their lives by starting their own private practices as well. And today we are doing an interview with Nataly. She's one of my mentees. Actually, I think you may have been my first mentee, actually, ever
I
in my
broke your cherry.
in my private practice group. We worked one-on-one, and then you ended up being in my full group and mentorship program. And so I wanted to interview to show people kind of the trajectory of how it goes. And you have a special circumstance because you started a practice as a new grad. And a lot of people want to know if it's, how it is possible to do that. So let's start from where you are now, and then we will rewind it back to how you got here. So tell me all about your current practice now.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be able to talk to you, and I'm really excited to be able to talk to new upcoming nurse practitioners to see how they can essentially have a freedom and do what they want. So in terms of what I do right now, I have a private practice in Napa, California, and yes, we're fresh out of wine. Hmm. But I, the special circumstances is that I've gotten into being a nurse practitioner specifically because I wanted to take care of my niche population. My focus within my psychiatric practice is really taking care of first responders, healthcare workers, military, and their families. We are a very kind of overlooked population in terms of as a risk because everybody looks at us as rescuers and we are the caregivers and we're there for everybody else. But people neglect to mention or neglect to see the fact that we actually are exposed to trauma all the time. And by the time that you've been doing it for 10 and 20 years, especially if you work in a high acuity settings, you develop your own significant amount of trauma. And if you think about veterans, like veterans go out to a tour, one tour, two tours, three tours. It is still a very timed situation, right? Then they come home and they can go ahead and recuperate from their trauma. For us, it's very different because we're in it for a very long period of time, nonstop. And because we're so overlooked at our trauma, we really kind of pack everything and then sit in a corner and hide whenever we spiral. So this is what inspired me to do my own spiraling. That's why I decided I wanted to do psychiatric care and take care of us.
Mhm.
And that's what I do now. I love what I do. This is the only thing I've wanted to do as a psychiatric nurse practitioner. And the reason why I went into private care is because my specialty doesn't exist. And if I wanted to see only first responders and healthcare workers, I had to be working for myself. It was really not a choice because no matter where I would have gone, I would have been working with general public, which is not where my interest lies.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. And so you've built a private practice, you're pretty full. You're full at this point. You're
Oh,
hiring even. And you've owned your practice what now? 2 years about?
it's actually been about a year and a half.
A year and a half. Oh my gosh, so
I
quick.
think I've only had my license for about 2 years, I want to say, maybe a little longer.
Yeah.
And since California is slow, so it took me a while before I graduated and got my license and then got things rolling. And I was incredibly fortunate because I've been like since even before I finished, lots of people talked me out of it. Like, how dare you thinking about having your own practice and you're a new grad and you have no idea what you're doing and all sorts of stuff. And there was a lot of discouragement. Even my best friend at the time was telling me, well, what's your plan B? And when I told her I don't have a plan B because I'm not interested in it, she got kind of upset with me, slash worried about me. And I was not willing to say no for an answer, to get a no for an answer. But I think the biggest reason why I was able to be as successful as I was is because of you.
Mhm.
The reality is that you gave me the mentorship and you gave me the part that I was missing because with a business aspect, I've already had a business because I teach trauma classes nationally. So that was already in place. And in terms of individualized thinking in general, I was already working as a flight nurse beforehand, and I've already been operating under protocols. So as a result of that, I knew how to think independently. I had that concept in the back of my mind. And plus, doing additional like 10 plus years of emergency department, you really are doing a lot of independent thinking. However, I had zero psych experience. Like, I had the experience in peer support with my peers, but I had zero experience in prescribing medications or managing care from that standpoint. So charting, how do you think through your, medication choices? How do you think about through your therapeutical intervention choices? Like, I didn't know any of this. So by meeting you, you gave me that missing piece that I had. So I had already a skill set, but I was still missing very, very essential skills. And that's where you came to me. And I'm incredibly grateful for everything you've done for me, because without you, I wouldn't be able to do that. I will never forget that phone call that I made to you as I was seeing my first client.
Yeah.
And it was one of my first clients. And because of the fact that when I went through my schooling, I went through COVID and I did my hours through COVID, honestly, they were very useless. Like, I haven't seen, by the time that I graduated, I haven't seen a single patient by myself, and I haven't physically prescribed a single medication. So I remember calling you almost with tears in my eyes, having no idea how to prescribe 30 milligrams of Lexapro because there's no 30-milligram pill. Do you remember that conversation?
Do remember that conversation. I think you were like refilling, the patient that had come to you. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I felt like an idiot calling you and asking you that question, but this is where I was. And as you know, in nursing practice, many of us run into a situation where we are afraid to ask questions. We all know about bullying in nursing, right? Nurses can be pretty mean to each other, and being a new nurse, you always are afraid to ask questions. And that was the thing with you, is that you really do create a very supportive environment around you. So despite the fact that I felt like a complete idiot calling you and asking you such a basic question, but I wasn't afraid, because you create that environment where it's okay to ask a question. There is no stupid question, truly. And I think that those are like, you have a ton of really good attributes, right? I adore you on many levels and I'm grateful for you on many levels. But those two things, and especially your attitude and how you raise your puppies, which is, I'm one of them, how you raise your puppies, the way that you do this makes it so easy and so accessible. And this is where I feel like the part where we can come now in your course, like back at the time when me and you just started meeting each other, we had one-on-one time.
Yeah.
This was before you created your course. So now the fact that the nurses or brand new NPs can come up and ask you questions during those groups, that is so incredibly valuable. Like, of course, all the content of your course is incredibly valuable, but having access to you particularly and being able to ask your own questions, that's invaluable.
Yeah. I love like it just like warms my heart. I just love seeing people grow. I feel like this is kind of like my purpose in life. And I think it breaks my heart when I hear people say like such and such can't do this, like whatever group can't do something, new grads can't start practices, or you can't start a practice with just first responders. It's too small of a group, or, just like anything like that. I just feel like it should be challenged, because what's great about you is, though you didn't have the experience in maybe like prescribing, when you talked about peer support, like you led retreats for first responders. So you were essentially doing like group therapy
Mhm.
in a retreat setting. So you knew psychotherapy with first responders, you knew therapeutic skills, like, but and you had the background from school with prescribing, like you knew what to do. But that's the thing, is like I think that new grads are not all created equal. They each kind of have their spin on it, and I think just blanket statements are really harmful, because like someone might be a new grad in psychiatry, but they're an FNP and they've already owned a business before. Or like there's one woman in my group that she's a new grad, but she owned a business. So she has business skills. She owned a business teaching children violin. Like some people might have business skills, some people might have psychotherapy skills. FNPs might have seen psychiatric patients in their job. Like new grads can be anything. And I think the bottom line, and I'm going to ask you about this too, is like, I think sometimes the bottom line is like, it's the support that the new grad has if they want to start a practice. And this is new grad or not new grad, but I always encourage new grads. It's helpful in restrictive states because you already have a physician collaborator. Is I think that two things, like you have support in your business, so like a course or a mentor or something, some guidance in business, which I think is good for new grad or not new grad, but I think new grads especially because there's a lot of anxiety there, and support in their clinical skills because new grads are learning clinical skills and business at the same time if they want to start a practice. And so what's nice is if you get a collaborator that's supportive, that you can ask them clinical questions anytime. I've even heard some new grads get physician collaborators that want to go through every single case with them. Like that you can build the level of support you want in your private practice. And I don't really know a lot of jobs that have that level of support, like jobs for new grads. Like sometimes you go and you don't even know who your collaborator is, or you don't have anyone to ask your questions. You're just stuck seeing 30 patients a day, but your private practice, you can kind of create it however you want. Or people that are in rural areas, sometimes they start a bit private practice because there's no psychiatric jobs in their area. They have
Right.
to start a telehealth practice in another state or whatever. I'm saying touching on a bunch of different topics, but I'm curious, do you agree that kind of like it just depends on the level of support that you have?
Yeah. I think whatever transferable skills you already bring into the picture are really important. And absolutely the level of support you get. And remember, it doesn't have to be in one way or another. I'll give you an example with me. My physician is fantastic. He's greatly supportive. I only get a hold of him via email. So there is limitation to that, right? Because he's very busy. He's got a bunch of different licenses in a lot of different states. He's got a bunch of different NPs. So with him, I really try to pick and choose of when do I get a hold of him, right? I only get a hold of him now when I have really complicated cases. And I only do it on paper. And it also provides me with an ability to have a track record of what I do with him, right? I have you who I can call and I can say, hey, Alicia, I don't know how to prescribe Lexapro. Can you please help me?
Yes, of
Right.
course.
Right. And then I have multiple people within your group that I've met that I can go ahead and bounce ideas for other things. Like I have one girl in your group who my business looks exactly like hers, and we have the same collaborating, right?
Yeah.
In addition to that, I ended up obtaining myself a second collaborating because I do functional medicine a lot. And despite the fact that I'm psychiatry, but I also have a lot broader kind of a perspective of what I do with my clients. So I have another physician who is a family physician who is also my collaborator. This allows me to do hormone replacement therapy and weight management in a more comprehensive way. Um,
Yeah.
in addition to having any other support that you may have, whether it's your friends, like I have one friend who is a critical care nurse practitioner and another one who is a family nurse practitioner. So I can always call them, hey, my labs are out of whack. What does ferritin at 400 means? What do I need to do with this client? So it doesn't have to be just one way or another. Just create yourself the support that you need. And remember, that's also going to change over time. What I needed a year and a half ago when I was calling you about the Lexapro is not what I need right now. Right. So
Exactly.
it will change, it will evolve, and it's okay. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that like your practice has grown and you've seen the needs of your population where you saw a lot of hormonal imbalance and you were like, how do I meet this need, but how do I also have, good support? And I remember this conversation where you and I had talked about, consulting. We have the same lawyer because we're both in California, and so we were like, maybe we should consult our lawyer who is incredible. We have a bunch of lawyer recommendations within our group. And so this lawyer, you talk to him about how can I provide functional medicine? Do I need a second collaborator? How can I do it? How can I do it well? And, within, with following compliance, and he helped. And that's a cool thing about just like kind of having a larger group. We're at 80 now, in the mentorship group. And, like everyone's kind of like California people are pretty close. And then I'm sure like you're close to, maybe you might have talked to other people that are working with first responders. And, it's just like you can bounce ideas and get help off of each other. And everyone has varying levels of experience. Some people have been NPs for 20 years plus, and some, are really, it's so interesting. Some are even go-getters who have started the course as NP students the, um, because it's a lifetime membership. So you can start whenever you want. Like you can start as being in school and then actually start your business like 5 years later. It doesn't really matter because you're in the group, you're a part of us. You're our squad, for what the end of
Right.
this very, very long time. So um yeah, I think that's really cool how you talk about kind of like building more support out over time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think just thinking outside the box, and
Yeah.
that's what it's all about. Because I mean, most of us that are willing to go and take that step extra of having your own businesses, that's already thinking outside the box. Because as nurses, we're not even taught that that's even an option,
Yes. Yeah.
right? So
Absolutely. I'm curious, a lot of people want to know decisions between like taking cash or taking insurance. How did you decide that for your own practice?
that's a really, really good question. Because going back into, I'm all about rolling with punches.
Yeah.
So I kept looking like I knew what my focus was, right? Pick the one thing that is your focus and figure out how you get everything you can. How do you get best at doing this?
Yeah.
Right. So for me, as I started seeing clients, I started seeing what their needs are. So because of the fact that lots of my clients are first responders, they don't make a lot of money. Most of them have families, multiple kids at home because of the fact that they have a crazy schedule. Typically, the spouse, if the spouse is not a first responder, they're potentially not working because the first responder works 24-hour shifts. It's really hard to find coverage, and so on and so on. So, what I've realized a lot of, because PTSD is really my bread and butter, complex PTSD that presents in first responders. So many of them end up being retired, going on workers' comp at a very early age. So very quickly, it became incredibly apparent that I have to be seeing workers' comp clients because the reality is that very many of my first responders are on workers' comp, and I probably now have about 30% of my clients are workers' comp. Workers' comp is an incredibly just a separate box kind of in terms of billing and functioning and all the stuff that need to happen with it. So I learned. And I found myself the resources that I needed in order to be able to accept workers' comp. And I also picked out the one insurance. I ended up going with just one insurance company that a lot of my first responders are. So I'm in California. So I looked at who are my biggest first responder employers. California Highway Patrol, CHP, and Cal Fire, right? Those are two state agencies where I get a lot of my first responders. They both carry Blue Cross PPO. So that's the reason why I decided to go with Blue Cross PPO. And then I found myself a fantastic biller. She's another one that became part of this group because she does such a great job. She's a small company. I'm all about supporting female-led companies, female-led small businesses.
Yeah.
And she's fantastic. And she was one of the few that is like, hey, no problem. I'll take your workers' comp. I'll help you figure this out. And me and her muffled through it. And here we are today. Actually, workers' comp, in terms of reimbursement, they reimburse very, very well when they reimburse. I mean, there is that too, right? They could be
Right.
hanging on to you for 6 months or a year, but when they do reimburse, they end up actually reimbursing very well, way better than insurance, at least
Mhm.
from my experience. So that's what I mean. You kind of roll with the punches, right? I started cash, then I decided that I needed to take workers' comp, then I decided I needed to take insurance, and now I've realized that that's about the max. I
Mhm.
don't want to be taking any more insurances. I still want to be doing cash, and that's how I decided it works. What's going to happen in 1 year? I'll let you know.
Yeah,
Who
that's
knows?
I think that's like the core of a private practice owner, and kind of what I see in people when they're looking to join is like just that ability to adapt and not feel like something's like a failure or like something's not working. Like you started cash. I remember you had contacted me like, okay, I'm building with cash. It's steady, but I want it to be faster. And so we kind of like thought. And I thought it was just brilliant that you looked into the insurances that were most common in your population that you see. Like that is genius. And then you eventually got into workers' comp because a lot of your population were like injured on the job. And, like it just all really worked. And I think that that's a better strategy than a lot of people that come to me, maybe that have started their practices already and they're kind of like not, they feel like it's not working. A lot of times, they've just credentialed with like 10 insurances. And so they're really overwhelmed because they're following whatever all those 10 want. It's different documentation requirements, different, this and that. And so I feel like strategically just having a couple, you can fill a practice with just a couple insurances. Like, and I mean, I take cash. You can fill a practice with cash. You have to be really patient. It takes a while, but you can even add one or two insurances like you have and just have it flourish. You don't need to take every insurance in the world. I think that people think that that's how they're going to fill a practice, is if they just like set up in a ton of states and take a ton of insurances, when the reality is that's a lot of upkeep and
Mhm.
that's quite difficult. And, one state, there's plenty of patients, one or two insurances, there's plenty of patients.
To piggyback on what you're saying, what I've seen a lot since kind of me and you have been in a course and I've been kind of participating and seeing how people develop and the new people who come in, what I've noticed is that many people walk in and they're like, I need to make all the decisions today and be all prepared by the day that I open. I need to know
Yeah.
exactly what insurances I take. I need to know everything and all that stuff. And people forget that, you know what? This is not a Catholic wedding.
No.
Not everything needs to happen today. Prioritize. What is you absolutely mandated for you to open your practice?
Correct.
Have your brain, have your support system, have a charting system, and figure out how to bill. If it's a pigeon flying through the window, whatever.
That's it. Yeah, like you do not have to have everything figured out. Yeah, people think that they just have to like know everything. You really, really figure
It's
this
almost
out.
a, it's almost a decision paralysis, right? You're sitting there and you're going, "Oh my God, it's going to be the end of the world if I'm not going to make it happen." And it's not
Yeah.
like that at all.
Yeah, yeah. That leads to people not opening because they
Exactly.
like, are just stuck. But if you decide, okay, what is the minimum I need to see my first patient, which I teach in the course, but you know, just what's the minimum to see a patient, do that, and then decisions come along the way. Like it doesn't stop when you open. You keep getting better every year. Like you're hearing, Nataly's like, I don't know what's going to happen in 2025, what you could have a totally different arm of your practice or it could look the same, it doesn't really matter.
Well, and I think lots of us also have this as a second career. I mean, most of us worked at least bedside, right? So you can still transition slowly. And I'll give you an example of my first patient, right? Like the first person that I've ever taken, he was already on my waiting list for 3 months before I ever opened. He was like sitting there and waiting for me because he knew that I was it because I was culturally competent and he hasn't had a good experience with clinicians beforehand. I did his intake. And I remember just going, holy crap. The guy had an extensive history. I literally got his chart that was about that thick, and it
Yeah.
had an incredibly extensive history. It literally took me a week to finish my intake chart alone. And I called him throughout this week about 3 or 4 times, going, hey, I forgot to ask you, what was your weight? Right?
Yeah.
And it was okay because I
Okay.
just took my time to start it. And I think within a first month that my practice was open, he was the only person I've seen.
Yeah. And,
And
and
it
and
was okay.
And that's almost better because like if you are, like if you're a newer business owner or a newer NP, like you don't want to have people banging down your door to see you
Mhm.
the first day. Like having it be slow is a good thing because then
Yes.
you learn your systems, you learn yourself, you can focus on your patients, there's nothing wrong with calling them and saying, wait,
Mhm.
what's this other detail? Like that's perfectly reasonable. There's nothing wrong with that. It's good care to be detailed.
And
And
people understand too when you explain it to them in that kind of a perspective of it's like,
yeah.
hey, I really want to make sure I'm thorough. I can't remember. Did you tell me about this particular color of your cat, or was it a different color?
Right. I need all the details right.
I remember it was a cat, not a dog. I just don't remember what color.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's good to start slow. And the other thing is, like Natalie said, a lot of people, and I recommend this in my course all the time, like do not quit your other job. Like this should be slow. I remember you were still working
Mhm.
shifts in the ER at the same time. Like you should be building your practice slow. And then now you're at the point where I think your practice is your only, well, you have two businesses, but your two businesses are your only income. You're not
I
working.
actually, my second business is already fully self-operational.
Oh, there you go. Okay. So
I'm not
most,
even touching my second business. I am full-time doing this and I have a
yeah,
waiting list.
yeah, yeah, there you go. So it's like you'll grow into it, but have your other job to pay your bills so that you're not. I notice sometimes when people quit their job to start their practice, they have all this stress on their practice, like, oh my God, this has to work. I need to get a ton of patients. And sometimes they make bad decisions. That's when they credential with a ton of insurances in a panicked mode. And then they get a bunch of state licenses in a panic mode. And then they take patients that they don't really want to see, that are like pushing their boundaries
Mhm.
or in a panicked mode because they need to make money. But when you have this side job, whether it's bedside or another NP job or whatever, just have your other job just to pay your minimum bills so you can make good decisions and move slowly in your practice, right? Awesome. So another, probably a last topic to talk about is a lot of people just want to know about money, like how are you able to sustain yourself from working another job and then your practice? Do you make more money or do you have more freedom or can you have more choices? What have you found as far as like the money trajectory for you from being an ER nurse to now?
So I want to start from the freedom part. Is that okay?
Yeah, do it.
I can never imagine working for anybody else ever again.
Yeah.
This is not something that I literally I can't even fathom doing this at this point. And I've only been away from like my ER job. I want to say I quit it less than a year ago, a lot less than a year ago. So that's the first part. Second part about the money. So of course money is important. Holy crap. Like mortgage and food are really, really important. And despite the fact that I love what I do, I also am a firm believer that I also should be reimbursed for it because I really do a good job with my clients.
Yeah.
So there's no really straight answer with the fact like, am I making more money? Am I making less money as a bedside nurse? Like that's not there's really no straightforward answer, especially if you co-own your business, because I have a lot of support, like a lot of business support, right? Like I have you, I have our attorney, I have my physician who owns 51% of my practice, and I owe 49. I have employees, I have a management company. Like it's all fairly complicated, and there's lots of moving pieces. So there's no straightforward answer in terms of like how much money do I make at the end of the year? I honestly don't know. Besides the fact it always changes because since I've started my practice, I've been making like my practice have been making more and more and more money every single month for the most part because I do different things. I provide more services. I am looking at hiring somebody. I change the structure of my business. So there is no really straightforward answer in terms of those like extra income. And I don't know that it's the right way of saying it, but that's the best kind of form that I can present it in. In terms of salary itself, like I'm in Northern California. In Northern California, as nurses, we make the highest amount out of all states, right? We are known to be making the most amount of money. So, um, when I was working bedside, I think the highest salary that I had was about $80 an hour. Um, I know some nurses here in California, they can make up to like 110, depends on the unit, depends on a hospital. So it really kind of depends on where you work. Um, Right now, in terms of like actual salary that I make 90 about $95 an hour. That's my salaried position. And granted, so now I also don't work hourly. I just pay myself a salary and my salary turns out to be about $95 an hour. But again, you're forgetting about like all of the expenses that are associated with your salary and your business, like the car and the cell phone and the insurance and all of the extra stuff that now you're starting to consider. Am I deducting it off of my taxes? Do I have less of a liability? Am I able to, like, do I need to get health insurance? Do I have health insurance through something else? How much money I saved on my health insurance? How much money did I save on my, I don't know, APR? Like, there's so many ins and out. So
Yeah.
there's really no number. It's really hard to put a number on it because it's not that straightforward. So that's why very often, like, you can't just tell them, do I make more money? Do I make less money?
Yeah.
I think overall, um, it's at least equivalent, at least.
Yeah.
At minimal, I should say it's equivalent. I feel like it's a lot more. And here's another thing that is even more important than money. The reason why I want to make what I make is because I want to improve my quality of life. I'm
Yeah.
not interested in making millions. I didn't start this job because I wanted to be a millionaire and drive a brand new Lamborghini and that ugly Tesla with the squares that is a brand new one that they recalled. That's not where my interest lies. But I want to be comfortable, right? I want to have flexible schedule. I want to be able to go to Hawaii whenever I would like to. I want eventually to have a second home in Hawaii where we can do retreats, right? So that is something that can be done from a business. What I'm trying to say is that there is a lot more flexibility, and I literally now have the life that I want.
Yeah.
I do what I love. I provide a service that does not exist, and I help people that I am passionate about. And I feel like I'm excited to go to work every day. I get to pick my team that I work with. I no longer have to worry about the asshole coworker,
Yeah.
right? Because we all have one or seven of those in every shift and every hospital, right? I don't have to
Yeah.
worry about it because you know what? I no longer participate in people like that because it's my choice.
Yeah.
So my quality of life have improved significantly. I get to pick and choose when I do my Pilates. I have an 8 o'clock in the morning Pilates class. That means I'm not going to see my clients until 10, and that's okay. And I
Yes.
want to go ahead and do my walking therapy, which is one of the other services I provide. And I can go for a walk in a park next to my house and being paid for it and providing a service. It's like a win, 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 and win.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's I feel like it doesn't, if I'm just going to tell you my salary, it's just not going to justify, it's not going to express the real benefit of having your own practice.
Yeah. That's the thing is like it's so hard to just give a number or an answer because most private practice owners settle at a place where they're like, wow, if I could make the same amount of money, but with, you know, write-offs on taxes, you choose your health insurance, choose your Pilates class, choose your schedule, choose your services, work with patients that you love, work with the population that just like fuels your fire, live the life that you want to. Like that and making the same amount of money is incredible. And I mean, Nataly's owned her business for a year and a half. Okay. Like she's making the same amount of money with all of that. And so her years to come, like imagine her 5 year, she's going to have all of that and probably a higher salary. So, or even more freedom, where she's like doing even less of certain tasks she doesn't want to do. So I think that's just like, that's the beauty of the private practice. And that's why the salary talk is hard because there's some things that are just not a number, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think we're out of time today, but thank you so much for joining.
Thank you
And
for having me. It's so good to see you.
just you too. Thank you for sharing everything that you did, and we'll talk soon.